morning, everybody. And thank you, Karen, and to the Churchill Club, Intuit, Skadden, and my guests for agreeing to this conversation so early this morning. And thank you all for coming out to the Churchill Club. I think of the Churchill Club as the preeminent place to have tech conversation about policy. So I am particularly excited to be here and with you all. And with two good friends to have just a small topic of discussion over the next hour or so. We're going to cover a lot of ground and we're going to try to do it quite quickly because there's so much to talk about. Before I forget to say it, at the end of the program, or as we near the end of the program, we're going to ask you, if you want to put together questions, and there will be, I think, cards available. No cards. We're just going to have a microphone. We're going to go ahead and pass the mic around for people who want to ask questions to our guests. So as you're hearing the conversation over the next 45 minutes to an hour, be thinking about questions that you might want to ask our guests. I'm sure I could spend much of our time talking about your bios. Both of you are august personages in the privacy space, and you have both been leading on these issues. I think of you both as provocateurs, in the sense that you have been doing things for so long and so well that you know what we can do better going forward. And that's why I think this conversation will be particularly interesting as we reach an inflection point in the legal structure of the European Union and the relationship of companies who are navigating that new structure as it comes into being. Rather than do introductions or bios, which are in your program, I thought it would be best if we just gave you both 2 to 3 minutes to talk about what you're thinking about first, what's on your mind, and then we'll dive right into questions. So, Giovanni, do you want to start us out?
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for your brilliant idea to organize this event. I'm so grateful to Churchill Club, Lawler. You bring me such a big opportunity to be here. Edith Ramirez, in an interview she released 2 days ago on her mission to Silicon Valley on security, she said, I'm here in peace. Let me say, I share this, that's a little bit more because I'm falling in love with this global hub of creativity. I really appreciate what you are doing here, and I'm mainly here to listen. I represent a small institution, let me say. We are sort of a European WhatsApp, but we come to be one day the European Facebook in the EU bubble, meaning that we are increasingly influential at the EU level. We supervise European Union institutions and bodies, 80 bodies at all. We cooperate with national DPAs.
The data protection authorities in the country.
Established, yeah.
I'm going to translate as we go along for the folks in the audience who may not be familiar with the European.
I'll be back on this point. But we also advise the 3 main institutions when they propose or approve important pieces of legislation. We recently landed with our own killer application for navigating the complex world of the data protection reform. But I'm not here to supervise. I'm here to listen basically, and I'm not here to preach. There's a sort of a misconception that the Europeans just want to say we do it better. But let me say that one of the main objectives of my mission is to analyze how this amazing innovation process may offer prosperity, economic growth, and business opportunities to the individual and to society. And I'm insisting for having the European Union reform future-oriented, flexible enough to be scalable, and to fit into the 21st century.
That sounds like an olive branch, Barb, from the Europeans. Now, I know Intuit has for many years been at the leading edge of all of this, but why don't you share your thoughts?
I think what we're thinking about as we look towards the new general data protection regulation and what's happening not only in Europe but beyond Europe is how can my team, really the extended part of the company, build in responsible ethical data practices in a way that doesn't slow the business down. And this is probably the thing that we hear most consistently from our partners developing new products, new enhancements, is the idea that they want to do the right thing, but they want to know how to do that. What's the best way? What's the most effective way? And our driver is making life easier, helping our customers save time and save money, and helping our business teams, our product developers, our data scientists understand in a way that's really simple, plain English language so they can build the right things as quickly as possible, but also be able to test ideas without fear that they're doing something wrong or run afoul either of a regulatory requirement, or just as much we're concerned about running afoul of our customers' very high trust and expectations they have of us.
So with that as just a brief introduction, there is so much to cover. We are truly at an inflection point where the 20-year-old or 20-year-young, depending on your perspective, European Union overarching consumer privacy law is in the process of being completely rewritten as we speak. Significant negotiations have been taking place for, Giovanni, 5 years? This makes Congress look fast, by the way.
Though at that time I was a little bit younger.
Me too, I had hair back then.
I had the honor to negotiate the current directive, which is still valid in terms of principles, but the way in which it has been implemented within member states, that doesn't work. It's too fragmented. And we have three main drivers because of the Lisbon Treaty, our new European Constitution, because of the technological changes, and because of the need to make this principle more effective in practice. So the trend is to have a better deal for citizens, to have rules that will work more in practice and will last for a generation. I'm expecting the reform published by early spring next year. We will have a transitional period of no more than 2 years. It means that by June, July 2018, this reform will be an important piece of reference for everybody in the world offering goods and services in the EU or monitoring behavior. But the challenge is not on how to make these principles more effective in practice, but on how to ensure global partnership, interoperability, how introduce fuller transparency for control at the global scale. You will find provisions on, targeted advertising, profiling, but this is not the main emphasis. Notice and choice will remain in, but in addition to many other requirements. In my view, the main change is on the introduction of an accountability project and in the availability of new tools such as codes of conduct, accreditation and certification, seals, audits, and a new generation of contractual clauses and binding corporate rules. So scalability is essential for small and medium enterprises and even for us.
It's an ambitious undertaking. The draft I just reviewed is a short 264 pages, which I'm sure everyone in the audience will spend time reading very carefully. I can't imagine, though, how we can make it actionable for people. So let me ask you, I'm going to provoke you a little bit here. The new draft, intended to be forward-looking, sounds, when you read it, talks all about rights. And you know, in the EU, the conception has been for at least 20 years that data privacy is a fundamental human right, which is a different way than we think about it here in the United States. We have different protections for it. But yet the new draft talks about at least 7 rights which are being created through the draft. There's a right to be forgotten, which will be written in the law. And there's been a lot of controversy out here in the United States about how you actually delete information out of the public record. And this is going to be a new requirement. There's a right of access so that every consumer can go and read what each company is collected about him or herself. There's an opportunity for direct marketing opt-out. Every citizen can just say, I want to be out of your marketing scheme, and you must pull me out. There's data portability, which I know many people here will applaud, the ability to move from company to company as you find better opportunities as a consumer. There's a right to almost instantaneous data breach notification. I think 3 days is the current rule in the draft that's proposed. There's a right to privacy by design, and there's a right for every citizen of the EU to have assistance from their own local data protection authority if they believe their rights have been abridged. This seems like a lot of rights. It seems like a lot of work that startups here in Silicon Valley will have to be contending with. How can we make this easier for them? And I'd love to hear, Barb, your thoughts about what challenges this may cause for people.
That's the challenge. Part of these principles and rights already exist or are being introduced by the Lisbon Treaty, meaning the fundamental right to the protection of personal data. Others can be a big opportunity in terms of business. For instance, privacy by design and privacy by default. I'm thinking to the chances for developers, designers, distributors, to certify new professionals. So it will be difficult for Europe to depart from this fundamental rights approach, but the question is on the innovative way in which this principle can be applied to a data-driven economy. So we, in our opinion, in the form of specific recommendations, we first deeply recommended to have a much flexible and shorter text, less prescriptive. We said that...
all the lawyers are happy, by the way, about the length.
Yes, that's part of our story, and history. But in any event, we would like to give controls much more flexibility and marginal maneuver. When I say flexibility, I'm not saying lowering safeguards. But one thing is required, one thing is to invest on safeguards, and there are various chances to work on scalable approaches and refrain from dictating the solution. I think data protection authorities should be much more selective, should give space to tools to develop accountability, by not invading their space in terms of identification of data retention periods. I think the same purpose and intention will offer some space for flexibility. So innovative thinking means to think to the future, to consider notice and choice are valid principles, but not for everything. We're not interested to boring boxes to fit it in, and we much more focus on transparency and to allow individuals to be simply in control. It doesn't mean the right to react everywhere. It means that you know the context where your data are to be used.
Barb, this sounds like an enormous set of new challenges. You've got a team that works to ensure fidelity for Intuit and your customers worldwide, to both the letter and the spirit of the law in the EU, the US, and everywhere. What sort of challenges are you foreseeing from the draft as it currently stands, and the change from the existing data directive to this new general data protection regulation?
We've been tracking the different language and evolution of the proposed regulation for a couple of years, and a couple of thoughts. Giovanni, it's interesting that you say that there's not a lot of emphasis on notice and choice, because when we read the proposed GDPR, this is actually an area that when we look forward and we think about not just ourselves, but our customers who are small businesses, there seems to be actually still remains a very strong emphasis on consent, and particularly around what profiling is and what that means, and what does the customer expect? What would our business like to do to actually delight customers? And I think what we're concerned about, and What I actually can't yet give direction to our, whether it's our chief architect, whether it's the product managers who manage products that our customers have been using for years, but are using them in a cloud-based way. I can't tell them what to put on their roadmap next year or the year after yet, because the regulation itself is still in flux. But what profiling means in the context of always on, data accessible, applications accessible anywhere, anytime in the world, the technology roadmaps that our teams are using are already laid out for 3 years. So anything that I ask them to do now, so let's take data portability. So I mentioned profiling, but data portability is a great example. Customers use QuickBooks online anywhere in the world. We have a significant base in the US and the United Kingdom. If I don't want to use that product as a citizen, as a customer, data portability suggests that I should be able to take my entire data file about my customers, my inventory, my vendors, my employees, my cash inflow and outflow, my invoicing, and take that to another vendor. Do I ask my product teams to build that capability or to enhance the capability to move data to a competitive product? Or do I have them prioritize consent around innovative data uses? Where do I prioritize? So I think we're actually very concerned still about how consent and profiling, particularly for novel uses. And we also are very conscious of what this is going to mean to small business customers, not only in the US, but certainly actually in the EU, where we actually like to see increased growth of small businesses and startups.
Please.
Let's see also the positive side. First of all, we're going to depart from the fragmented framework. We're going to give companies just one phone number instead of 28.
At least 28.
We are going to introduce a consistency mechanism based on the exclusive competence on the legal authority, which in any event is an achievement. The question is also on the way where certain principles can be implemented. Documentation, for instance, we criticize a lot the excessive details on the kind of papers to be retained by controllers, and therefore I think this is something to be considered. We also launched the ICANN framework, an initiative where we would like to demonstrate in practice that by investing energies on privacy by default and privacy by design, you can perhaps anticipate certain challenges and also take care of certain opportunities. I agree that because of the broad scope of the notion of personal data, because of the invasive notion of profiling, everything will be within the scope of application of the regulation. It doesn't say that we are having the same approach for everything. The data protection regulation will be subject soon to an important test because of the Internet of Things, because of the big data world. And I'm the first ready to work on a lighter approach in front of platforms to collect the data where processing is transparent, where even private entities are collecting information for important objectives in the public interest, research, for instance, statistics, or to offer services to individuals and consumers. My main emphasis is not on requirements or on safeguards, fundamental rights, but my reflection, this is why I'm here to understand how technologies will develop, is on how to see the individual in such a data-driven economy, in a world where we would like to be ubiquitous computing, to be connected, we have to provide information So in the opinion we have published on Friday on the ethical dimension of data protection, we launched a reflection on the idea to have a personal data stores, vaults, that can translate into a different way, a questionable principle of portability we criticized in the EDPS opinion of 2012. As proposed initially, that right doesn't work, and this is why you will find it in the app a different viewpoint. On the right to be forgotten, I discourage to have new traditions.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very frustrating for people in Silicon Valley who are used to, and in the American mindset, where we're used to having access to information, good, bad, ugly information, where we want to have access to it. And this notional concept of a right to be forgotten, the ability to write out of history, demand that companies eliminate information, is going to be an extraordinary challenge now that it's been really, I think, locked into the draft. I think many people would prefer that be left on the cutting room floor, as we say here in California.
It has been very animated debate, particularly right after the publication of the judgment, but the statistics released by DPAs and Google are quite reassuring. So they got, a peak in terms of requests, but now the trend is decreasing a lot, and the number of cases where people complained before data protection authorities, and data protection authorities disagree with search engines is very small. No more than 50 cases in 1 year, by considering all 28 member states. That's quite reasonable.
Yeah, this is a clash of cultures issue between the United States and our mindset and the Europeans. Let me go back to the paper you were mentioning that you published on Friday, which I think is really groundbreaking and quite interesting. I'm fascinated as somebody who's been doing data privacy and thinking about the ethical notions, the mores around data collection, usage, sharing, storage for many decades now. And Barb, I'd love to hear your thought, because I know this is sort of the value set that you bring in part into it. This is a concept that you're going to introduce in addition to this new legal structure. We're going to have a conversation now led by you about ethics and whether companies have a responsibility other than to their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to increase value about the proper usage of data. And you're going to bring in people, at least from the way the paper is described, who aren't traditionally in the technology space or aren't used to handling data. They're from the research side, they're from academia, psychologists, et cetera, to have a fulsome discussion. I'd love to hear, Barb, first your reaction, having looked at the paper, and then Giovanni, I'd love to hear what your goals are for this and where you hope to lead the discussion on data in the future, about ethics.
So let me address your question in a couple of ways. At Intuit, we have what we call a data stewardship approach. And it starts with the idea that we know our customers have such a high degree of trust because of the sensitive data we hold about them. We also are very explicit that we say it is the customer's data, not ours. So yes, in the EU vernacular, we are a controller, but we really want the customer to be in charge of his or her own data, which means the uses of his or her own data. And that doesn't mean that they're making decisions and control points or choices every step of the way. Transparency is very critical. We think of data stewardship as our values or our ethics around privacy that really are concurrent with our company values, like integrity without compromise and care and give back, and other company values that really drive how, as a company, we operate, how we run our business, and how we make decisions. We also commit, though, in data stewardship that there's value in using data, and that's really a commitment to our customers to find new and novel ways to use data that will provide value and benefit to them. And a lot of times we don't know what that's going to be. Our data science organization is really excited by the idea that, again, they can find new ways to help benefit the customer. So it's not a monetization play for us at all. It's finding that new, great, cool, exciting thing that's going to make our customers' lives even better, make the product even easier to use, run faster, more intuitive. You think about we'll go to Internet of Things later, but from a values perspective, it's really intriguing to see some of the thoughts in the paper and the idea of what is the role of dignity and individual dignity around the use of data. How does that relate to a person's values or a company's values? And when we think about using data, we think of it in terms of benefit and seeking benefit for an individual, whether they're a customer or a potential customer. We don't worry so much about that, about what's in your paper, but we also think about privacy and data use as not a zero-sum game, but as something that's opportunistic, where you want to maximize benefit for all the stakeholders, which means we worry in a values approach that there's a reticence to actually use data, and that actually might even impinge unintentionally either on an individual's dignity or benefits to society.
I heard you say, Giovanni, at the beginning that you didn't come here to preach, but rather to have a conversation. And I appreciate that you're reaching out to have a normative discussion, and in addition to the one about the change in the legal structure that's coming. What are your goals for this? What do you want Silicon Valley to hear from you about this? I know, having worked with dozens of startups over the years, and frankly big companies, small companies that became very large and successful companies, that quite apart from what's written about, people in Silicon Valley think all day, every day about data, what can go wrong with it, what should be done with it in the most appropriate fashion. Ethics is built into the bloodstream here. So what are you hoping Silicon Valley will hear from you about the conversation about normative ethics?
We published the opinion on Friday, not by chance, but because we would be proud to launch a debate, to see the Silicon Valley taking actively part of the debate, with a view to put our soon ethics and accountability at the heart of tech innovation. And we started with an analysis on why human dignity was considered in the middle of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th
It's a fascinating analogy, yeah.
And we also discovered that human dignity has a different meaning around the world, while, for instance, in some countries such as Europe, could be considered as something inherent to a natural person. In other areas, for instance, the APEC framework, it's a notion closer to reputation, something you can lose. But I think we have all in mind the idea that technologies should serve the individual. So we describe in a few pages expected developments on robotics, artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, to say that we don't want to see privacy and data protection blocking innovation. So we would like to encourage this process. We think that data protection laws, though they will better interact with consumer law, competition law, will be unable to give all the answers. Because there is an ethical dimension around what will be increasingly technically feasible, but not entirely morally tenable. And I think we
That's a really important phrase.
the human being, not because he's a subscriber, a user, and a consumer, but we launch a reflection on what it means respect in an interconnected society. I think we perhaps will get more results in terms of lighter approach on formalities, requirements, documentation, procedures, because we will have an idea that the individual is respected, not because of the interference of the private sphere, but on a global approach. And I think this is the right place to have a discussion. This is why I really come to have some people from the US as full member of the ethics board.
There will be U.S. participation requested.
I would really love to have.
We'll take volunteers from the audience later on.
I'm considering the idea to have a small group of 5 up to 6 people. But I would really count on in 2 layers, perhaps more experts to be involved at different meetings. I would be so pleased to have everybody in.
We're all in.
But then we have to focus on a few volunteers.
It's an extraordinary invitation. One of the parts of the draft that I want to focus back on the general data protection regime, which I think is terrifically challenging for startups and frankly large companies in the Valley that are using data, or finding data, value in data that they'd already acquired about their users. They want to use it in new and interesting ways that they had not originally foreseen when the data was collected. This is an age-old problem. Suddenly, aha, you have a eureka moment. Your engineers come to you and say, we can do this amazing set of things, and our customers would, to use Barb's word, be delighted if we can provide that to them. And yet, the draft of the new General Data Protection Regulation again requires, and this is the fancy legal word, minimization, i.e. a requirement that companies get rid of data that they don't immediately need for the original purpose for which it was collected. It seems to be that's going to be, I think, a flashpoint for how are we going to continue to innovate, how are we going to find new value, how are Barb's teams going to be able to provide great new delight to their customers. I wonder, Barb, if you can talk about this briefly, whether you see this as a challenge or something that Intuit can design around. And Giovanni, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well about how do we deal with this innovation, minimization clash.
One of the frequent concerns we hear from our product managers, or questions we hear from our product managers and engineers is, I'd like to use this data in an experiment to provide a new opportunity that we think would benefit our customers. But we didn't tell them about that before. It wasn't in a privacy notice. It wasn't a part of the product experience. Does that mean I have to go back and ask them for their permission to do that? And the discussion that we have is values-based on data stewardship. We think about being an accountable organization and what have we committed to from a policy perspective. And what we end up having is that very kind of nuanced discussion about what does the customer actually expect? What does it mean if we test it without permission? Will someone complain? Should we take a risk? So there's always risk-based decisions sometimes around using data. One of the things that we've developed when we think about technology, I think actually technology enabling privacy, not in the way we thought about in the last decade or even the decade before, privacy enhancing technologies, but I would say privacy assisting technologies, guiding technologies, is we developed what we call a data use guidance tool. And that's taken rules and guidelines from our privacy policy, from our values around data, European and particularly United Kingdom rules, and specialized rules in the US. And we created a simple interface based on a database tool that allows really anyone, whether I'm a marketer, a product engineer, data scientist, can I use data? Because a lot of times they can. It's actually within our terms. It's within customer expectations. And they can go through in three or four easy clicks and say, here's what I want to do. Here's the kind of data. Here's where it came from, the source. And it tells them what to do. Now, we invested probably 2.5 years, and we'll continue to invest in that. We're a small team, and we actually use that to scale. When I say small team, and a few of them I'm delighted are here in the room, there are 4 of us and me. And for a company that's $4.5 billion, most companies don't have the wherewithal to develop those kinds of tools. So when we think about what's happening next is I would actually ask you, Giovanni, how can small companies, large companies work with the EDPS to find simple tools and solutions that actually, frankly, will interpret what is the complex but for those of us who are privacy geeks and all this sort of thing, the complex ideas and rules in the proposed regulation. Would you be willing to host workshops that might actually help businesses? How are you thinking about tools or other guidance that will actually help organizations implement the regulation?
What do you think? Some workshops? Some guidance? I'm putting you on the spot.
As you remember, I am announcing in early March with my 5-year strategic plan that I want to open an entirely new chapter on data protection.
It is a breath of fresh air.
Current data protection, as we know, is a little bit old-fashioned. It will take time. And experience shows that, of course, what is, in a primary law is essential, but then much more essential is the day-to-day practice. Though we are a smart startup, we can be influential in the last mile to debureaucratize once again the provisions we briefly commented. But then I think the challenge is more on the accountability approach and the ethical dimension. I think the more controllers, developers, designers consider the individual as a center of gravity, I think the more we will have moral suasion effect to debureaucratize much more, to have increasingly scalable solutions, to demonstrate that what is essential is fairness, is transparency.
With a focus on the individual.
Yes, exactly.
That's what you want to have everyone, especially.
If you have 5 minutes, for instance, just this afternoon, spend again then to have a look to our opinion on mobile health, to say that we would like to encourage the development of apps from fitness to medical care. But there are a few details to be considered if you really want to have a successful business on this area. You cannot simply have in mind the beauty of an app. You should also make a test.
All right. No, maybe not the beauty of the sound here. So you actually developed and launched an app this summer. I have it on my phone here.
You believe that a regulator built an
Yes,
app?
app. How many regulators? I think even our U.S. regulators don't have an app.
I can't name one.
So, in your own
The
study,
downloads are just blowing up on
and so the papers that Giovanni references are actually in his app, and it has a fine, robust privacy policy. What did your office learn in creating an app that gives you insight into what it's like to be a startup and to actually develop applications? Tim, that was probably your question.
No, it's okay.
It has been a success story. The budget was around $14,000 US.
14.
Yes. And the developer is a Belgian company, Synapses. Since the very beginning, we say we want to...
So you outsourced the engineering of the app?
Yes, but under strict control, in the sense that we did some tests in our laboratory in cooperation with the company, because the idea was, of course, for data protection watchdog to be of an example. So
it's an amazing learning experience.
We want to distribute information to communicate. We will carefully analyze in terms of analytics the downloads. US is on top of the statistics. I'm so proud, and we demonstrated in the homepage that there is a chance to use a plain communicable language to say in 3 lines what we're doing in terms of personal data, where the data are. For instance, you can make bookmarks, and we say be reassured that they will stay on your devices, and both Google and Apple will not monitor what your comments, your opinions on the GDPR. I think it has been a successful story in terms of transparency of the legislative process to bridge the gap in terms of knowledge of what is happening but also in the assessment of a standard toolbox we got from the market, and it was adapted to the case.
I think it's a
little bit
wonderful
unusual
example
for public institution to do
It's
it.
extremely unusual.
I run the risk to work here.
No, we like forward looking. We're nearing the point at which we're going to ask you to ask your own questions. I'm going to ask one more and last question. I can't believe how fast this has gone. So if you have questions from the audience, we'll take a few after this next question. So begin to think about what you'd like. We'll pass a microphone around. I want to talk a little bit about what's next. You mentioned the Internet of Things, big data. I anticipate, and I've been coaching many of my clients, that we're headed towards an era of what I call mass customization or mass personalization, where every company is going to give individuals exactly what he or she, what each individual wants, exactly when they want it. They're going to be able to change their control, their consent at a moment's notice to get exactly the kind of customized goods and services that they want. So this is what I anticipate as the next big era. I wonder how the two of you could prognosticate about what's coming next. And maybe, Barbara, I'll start with you and finish with Giovanni, and then we'll open it up for a few questions from the audience. How is the new GDPR going to challenge this? How will we build in flexibility? I know you used that word many times, and I appreciate it. How will we coach your 28 cohorts around the European Union who are going to be implementing the rules which you're guiding them towards to think about what's next as new technologies roll forward? Not just mass customization, but the Internet of Things, big data, whatever's going to be next. Artificial intelligence. Barbara, please.
Everything that we do in our products is in some ways about customization because each small business is unique. The amount of data, the type of data, the nature of the data, the nature of the business is different. So think of that as we think of that as the first level of customization, but what we really want to be able to do is you mentioned earlier that aha moment. What we want to be able to do is actually create that aha for our customers. And so if I'm a small business, maybe I can get paid faster. If I get paid faster, I have more cash flow. I can pay my employees sooner. And we want to be able to customize that to each individual small business user. So that's real-time rapid data analytics that uses connected services, everything from identity to additional services that help them take payments, pay their employees, and look for new ways to grow their businesses. What I'm hoping to hear about, though, maybe when we get to Q&A, is connected devices will actually lead to even more customization and personalization. So whether it's a smart watch or you're in Silicon Valley, it is kind of the land of Tesla and connected cars. And so the idea that your connected smart vehicle actually provides input into what your business is doing. Almost half the small business owners are mobile, which means they're in a vehicle, more and more vehicles are being connected. So how do we allow those to talk together in a way that's meaningful and leaves the individual at the center, but doesn't burden the individual with constant decision-making and choices on what's going to make their life better. They want it to just work for them. They want it to be simple.
Giovanni, new technologies, new challenges, new normative structures. What do you see? What's coming next? How will we synthesize the new legal structure, the new normative discussion you're having in these new technologies?
I can only promise to persuade my good colleagues to invest more in normative thinking. But on the basis of reciprocity, normative thinking is also a challenge for business companies.
Sure.
I think individuals, by providing increasingly more information, by being profiled, customized, they will better understand, particularly in case of use of plain language, communicative words, the context where its data is used. And I think that they will accept even an invasive processing personal data in the context of fairness and transparency. I'm not expecting a radical approach in terms of portability, in terms of consent. I think the emphasis will be more on how the controllers will allow people to better understand where the data go and to take actions where necessary. So transparency is, in my view, the big challenge.
Tell your users what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let them know. Forecast it. Signal.
And the more controllers will be active in clarifying, allocating the responsibilities for the system of cloud computing approach, or by demonstrating that design and default are good principles that could also be opportunity in terms of business. I think this will be a success story. So
we like success stories.
Good for all.
Good. Let's take some questions from the audience. There's a gentleman in the back who's got a microphone. Please, if you could stand so everyone could see.
Thanks. So do you foresee limitations on click-through licenses to restrict the privacy rights that you're granting? Do you foresee restrictions on the use of click-through licenses for people to give away their rights to privacy? So, for example, I recently bought a song from iTunes for $1.29, and I had to click through promising that I had read and agreed to a 9-page license restricting what they could do with the information. Will that continue to be valid?
Well, let me repeat the question for everyone and for the videotape. Question is about, do we foresee restrictions on click-through licenses, agreements, lengthy permissions, screens? How will your colleagues in the EU handle this? Or what should be done? Let's have you both jump in on this.
I'm not expecting restrictions, but best practices. If you see the app, you will discover that in 29 cases, we encourage to replace implementing acts and delegated acts, so primary law by the Commission, with guidance, best practices, and recommendations by data protection authorities. So flexible laws based on interaction with controllers, not excluding codes of conduct. So the more we interact and cooperate, the more we anticipate actions before courts or class actions or radicalization of provisions that can be applied in different ways.
Barb, you and I worked very closely together on what we call short-form transparency screens under the convening of the Obama administration to allow mobile apps to have in less than a page or only 2 screens of any size device, just a screen, the ability to understand what data was being collected from each user and have the user understand that in literally 1 screen and who that might be shared with, what kinds of third parties. What do you foresee? What should happen? What's Intuit working on?
So a couple things. I actually want to go to the question we just had around click-through, and I don't foresee that changing. I think, for good or for bad, that it's a necessary part of how products and services are delivered, but necessary but not sufficient. So Giovanni, to your point around transparency, we would never solely rely. We'd like to get away from the multi-page click-through notice. I have no idea how we would actually get around that, though, because it's still an important part of the legal compliance structure. But we would always emphasize transparency. Tim, you talked about the NTIA multi-stakeholder process for short-form privacy notices. Those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. So I mentioned that data use guidance tool, so we have examples of those and others actually in the tool that show our engineers, here's a way to provide transparency. One of the things questions that we saw, so we tested those notices. We spent a year developing those, by the way, as well as the code was developed, is that Often when consumers, customers, citizens see notices, they want to make a choice even when there's not a choice available, which may be a limitation of the operating system, whether it's iOS or Android, as an example. So as we look forward, we're going to continue to look for ways to provide really in the moment, as part of the customization process, but in the moment transparency. And there's a real tension with ease of use, not interfering with what the individual wants to do with the product, and actually providing the right information, transparent, in context.
Yesterday we had many bilateral meetings, and we've been impressed, my good colleague Christian and I, by a colleague, I will not name and shame any company.
But you're on a listening tour here.
We have been invited to read a long notice and to sign, to take a picture. It took 20 minutes to enter and why are we doing that?
Did you feel like your dignity was...
No, I was so curious, and then the motivation was, this is because of the California. No, then I got an email with the full text of the notice, and this was just because of a badge. And my mind immediately came to my country of origin, Italy, where we have now a big problem concerning the so-called defensive medicine. Because of the risk to be subject to a civil action, doctors ask you to do every kind of medical care. They document everything. So they apply the Latin motto on the Roman Empire. Estote, parati means I would like to cover my back in all ways. And I see that that's the risk we run by, for instance, focusing on certain approaches by controller. Perhaps lawyers are so, dynamic in encouraging prudence, but there is a threshold.
We're going to bring all your colleagues here from Europe and have them all sign the similar agreements over and over again. Next question, please. So, woman.
Hi, thank you. Hannah Kishler from the Financial Times. I wanted to know if there was any provisions in the draft proposals for data after acquisitions. I think this has been something that we've seen over here, has sometimes been controversial. For example, when WhatsApp was acquired by Facebook, there was a lot of anxiety about that data now changing hands, and I was wondering whether there was any way of forcing companies to treat the data exactly the same, or will they have to go through new permission processes or anything?
According to the current draft, there are no big developments on this issue. The principle will remain more or less the same. It builds on purpose limitation and again transparency. So individuals are to be informed about the content, and there is an assessment about the so-called compatibility between the unless in case of acquisition, for instance, the context remains the same. So it's an issue relevant in terms of ownership, but it is irrelevant in terms of processing of personal data. Anyway, we launched last year with a so-called preliminary opinion and debate involving many U.S. players. FTC has been so active to
The U.S. Federal Trade Commission.
Exactly. To see how we can better cooperate, not only in terms of enforcement, to work on a sort of a holistic approach. We know that consumer law, competition law, and data protection are working a little bit on silos. And
sometimes in conflict with each other.
Sometimes in conflict. And this is relevant in terms of current enforcement actions. So we would like to be of an help, although we are an independent institution, we do not interfere on pending investigation. But we see that competition authority are discovering how data is really the new currency, the oil of the data-driven economy, what it means apparently to deal with apparently free of charge services, to which extent the current competition laws properly consider these merger and acquisitions, and therefore to think in a future-oriented perspective at the global scale. The feedback is quite positive. We also posted on the website the abstract of the conclusions. So we got in a workshop, a successful event organizing in June last year. We want to continue working on this area. I met Commissioner Vestager a few weeks ago to offer support to their activities, though we are respectful of what they are doing. We will not take part specifically by a formal viewpoint of their investigations.
Our data is the new antitrust, harmonization of laws across sectors in the legal structure. That's a weighty topics for not even 9 a.m. in the morning. Any thoughts?
We had several points right there. Actually, what I was reflecting on in the last few minutes, and we talked about harmonization, we look for harmonization around the globe. And we know the high bar that Europe traditionally has set around data protection and transport of data flow. One of the things that we think is really critical to enable not just companies successful in the US, but actually successful in working in the European environment is the Safe Harbor Agreement and the final approval of that.
We should tell people what the Safe Harbor Agreement is.
So the
Barbara, you can explain this very briefly for people.
I was going to do that.
Sorry, thank you.
So, Safe Harbor is an agreement between the U.S. Department of Commerce and the European Commission, which companies self-certify as to a set of privacy principles that are consistent with European data protection requirements. As the GDPR has been proposed, Safe Harbor also being revised. We've been very public in our support, both for Safe Harbor and also the need and acknowledgement and support of the changes that are being proposed. It's one of the things that we think is actually critical for the U.S. and European economies together to move forward. It's a critical mechanism for companies to move data across borders. So Safe Harbor provides the legal mechanism or framework that allows U.S.-based companies to bring data into the U.S. from the European Union countries. So that's something that's really important for us, and so we look at what are cross-border privacy rules, whether they're out of Asia-Pacific economic community, whether they're Europe, and how can we need to harmonize those internally, or will the regulators actually around the world, not just in Europe? Giovanni, actually, I wanted to ask you a question. I know there's a question in the audience, but you mentioned, and we appreciate on behalf of all of my privacy colleagues, flexibility and your efforts to be a thought leader and have a new flexible dialogue around what data privacy and ethical data use means in Europe. I wonder, are your colleagues, the DPAs at the country level, feeling in as flexible a mood? And
California, we need yoga classes for the...
how will you bring them along to that flexible mindset? And actually, how can companies represented here otherwise help you with that?
I'm quite confident they will be on the same track. There is a lot of rotation. New colleagues will be joining us, and of course they are a little bit respectful of those having a little bit of more experience. We basically work on the basis of a consensus within the network of DPAs. We are encouraging, and this is what is reflected in the study, that the EU speaks with one voice on data protection. Anytime I'm in the US, I really appreciate, and it's so sincere, that speaking with entirely different people, law enforcement, business community, scientific community, you are so proud of the US approach, and you find much less diversity. And this is something I come to have in Europe as well. So to speak with one voice means to have less fragmented approaches, not only in terms of procedures. So we promise that the big giants and even small and medium enterprises will not be approached by, for instance, a regional DPA saying this is what you should do.
So the Slovenians aren't going to be telling the folks from
I
the
appreciate that,
Netherlands.
but I mean, the approach is to be global. The innovative thinking is a spirit I see they share. I'm quite confident. A little bit of time, yes, but let me positive.
A quick show of hands from the audience. How many people have done Safe Harbor for one of their clients? There's a lot of folks in the audience. Hands up in the air. It's a pretty good showing. Yeah, there's a lot of folks here who use the Safe Harbor provisions. Next question.
So you would be curious to see by next Wednesday the opinion of the Advocate General of the
You're prognosticating for us now.
Yes. I don't have with me the crystal ball, but I can simply suspect what to do.
Next question, please. You can stand up.
I know you were talking about speaking with one voice and a harmonised approach, and I know
Not my voice.
I know one of the key proposals in the draft regulations is this idea of a one-stop shop, and I know that has been increasingly watered down. So, kind of, it was a beacon of hope here that lots of US companies would only have to deal with one supervisory authority, but I don't know if you could update us to where you've got to in the discussions with that, because it seems to be increasingly watered down. So.
Yeah, I think the one-stop shop, for those who didn't hear the question, is this concept that, again, companies would only have to deal with one of the 28 supervisors, that supervisor would take sort of the lead if there were to be questions, discussion, and also for the European citizens, that they would only be able to have to go to their local DPA. So it works in both directions, as I understand the directive. What can you tell us about the state of negotiations?
It's still a little bit controversial, but let me be positive. This has been perhaps the most controversial point in the debate, and it's quite natural to understand the reactions of national DPAs feeling a little bit deprived of what they are doing. One-stop shop only relates to cross-border cases. And it doesn't mean that we should introduce a new bureaucratic approach. So in my app, I've deeply discouraged to bureaucratize this process as well. So I think, more flexible tools have to be used in terms of bilateral exchanges of views, and by escalating to the plenary only in cases where it is indispensable to have a collective approach. The newly appointed European Data Protection Board, we will provide its secretariat, can only work with no more than 12 cases per year. It means that potential discussions and divergences are to be solved earlier, video conference, via bilateral meetings, and so forth and so on. Anyway, now COMEX and the legislator accept the idea to have a binding decision by the board in case the case is still controversial, and to recognize the exclusive competence of the lead authority. So it could be that in very rare cases a national DPA may disagree and adopt sort of a dissenting decision at national level, but then the controller will have a chance to complain before the national court and or before the European court.
I feel confident that your guidance will be to help bring this all to one-stop shop implementation. This is, in some ways,
that's the only role, right? If you want to say that regardless of the location of the servers and the establishments or various establishments, you will in any event apply the EU rules to everybody working in the EU, even remotely, then you should offer in exchange one phone number and that's it.
I know that'll be exciting for everybody here at Silicon Valley who won't want to have to go to 28 different countries to get things ironed out. We're at the point of concluding our discussion, and we're going to ask simply for both of you to give final remarks and some last thoughts. Or why don't I start with you, to just share some final thoughts about what you see coming, where we should be going.
At this point, I'm, dare I say, excited that the GDPR will be concluded and will be final, because then I can help my company and my team move next. But when I think about what's coming and what I'm seeing now in Silicon Valley, I'm ambivalent when you mentioned connected devices and the Internet of Things. When connected devices, when smart fabrics, when smart biological materials interact with each other in a way where the individual is present but not necessarily at the center, and how will those technologies somehow enable transparency, God knows, choice. I can't even imagine what, we were moving already from small screen to no screen, and what is that? How will those technologies be successful and actually find the opportunity gainfully to provide real benefit to individuals or society? So I'm excited that we'll finally know what the GDPR is going to be. Looking forward to that announcement next week on Safe Harbor. And cautiously hopeful but curious about how will technologies that even the GDPR hasn't considered be successful in a way that provides benefit to everyone.
This must be a first. Someone in Silicon Valley said they were excited about regulation.
No,
I take
I
your
said
point.
I was excited that it was finally settled.
The end of the debate.
It is actually helpful.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's what we need. So Giovanni, take your last thoughts, and thank you both again.
It's true, just a final comment, it's true that the EU has been a little bit successful in the recent year in exporting its data protection principle to the rest of the world. But let me say, Europe is for the first time in minority, because more than 189 countries around the world have now data protection laws. We see that DPS visits from Japan, Singapore, Bermuda, Chile, and there is a lot of excitement around data protection. So global partnership is essential. Europe and US have a shared heritage of democracy and human rights. So I think on the basis of our convergent traditions, we have a chance to work better together.
I hope you will join me in thanking both Giovanni and Barb and the Churchill Club and Skadden and Intuit for its sponsorship for this fabulous discussion. Thank you all so very much for being with us.
Giovanni and Barb, thank you so much for your candor, sharing your insights with us this morning, and Tim for guiding the conversation so well. As a small token of our appreciation, we have for you your very own Churchill Club speaker t-shirt.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Churchill.
You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you again. A recording of this program will be available on our YouTube channel as quickly as possible. Please do exit through the front door, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.